Okay, so here's my Plasti-Dip cover. You can see it's starting to peel up a couple of spots from where I put it in my backpack. I'm going to show you guys how to upgrade this X401A-1 technically. I've got a solid state drive in this and a 8 gig of RAM chip at this point. Got it working. The hard drive upgrade was actually the most challenging part of all this. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 screws that you have to remove in order to get the front off. I found that once you get all these, like I mentioned in my other video, it's kind of a pain to get it started because it uses plastic snaps instead of just screws to hold it in. There's clips back here in the back under the battery cover area. If you see, I don't know if you can see them very well with the camera. I found that if you open it, like start releasing the top there first, once you've done that, you can typically just pull it from the back first and get this, and then it comes off like that. You release the tabs on the ZIF connectors, and that's that. Here's a quick little overview of this. Okay, once you've done that, you've got your hard drive here. It's got easy access. I don't have the cradle for this on here right now, just because I've been doing so much messing around with pulling the drive in and out with the other hard drive. But you simply pull it out. I think I've got the stock one, I'll show you. It's just 2 screws on this side, pulled out. You'll transfer the hardware onto your solid state drive, or larger capacity if that's what you're going for. Here is the cradle adapter piece for the hard drive. It is a slim, but there's plenty of space for a standard height, or probably even a taller 11mm drive. So for the removal, the RAM is under here. There's 2 ways you can do this. You can remove all the screws, which I'll do. You have to remove all the screws regardless. And you can pull the whole board out, or you can just tilt it up enough to give yourself access to the memory slot, which is what I did the last time. The first time I pulled the whole board out, with the exception of the screws on the heatsink fan, all of the screws on the motherboard have this little white triangle because there's some holes that are basically just pass-throughs for the top of the case. There's 2 screws for the fan that you have to remove. And don't do what I just did, which is get a screw stuck in the fan blade. So if it gets lost in there, it's going to be a pain in the butt to get it out. Luckily, that wasn't too big a deal. So you've also got this little expansion board over on the left-hand side. You've got to remove it because there's a heat pipe that runs along here that you'll need to have access for pulling the board out. Now at this point, I've found the best way to get it out is to start on this heatsink fan. Peel up on this little guy so you can get a better grasp on it. And then once you have it at this point, the ports and stuff on the right hand side of the board are inserted into the plastic a little bit, so you can't actually just pull directly up this way. Hopefully that makes sense. You have to angle it and then pull this way a little bit so that you can get them out. Now if you want, you can disconnect the screen connection, this little expansion board, all the rest of your connections to get at the memory. But at this point it's out enough that you can get to the memory slot, which is right there. At this point, just click the two tabs. I'll go ahead and pull the memory slot out so you can see, or the memory chip rather. So here's the chip I'm using. It was like $22, I think. I haven't had any problems with it. And that's that. Just reverse the order. All of these screws are the same height, which is nice because then you can't get them wrong. However, as you may have noticed, the two screws that come in right here from the bottom are taller than the rest of the screws from the bottom. So you need to make sure those go back in the right slot. Otherwise, you'll probably put a dent or maybe even puncture your plastic top. And nobody wants that. Also be careful not to over tighten these, because basically there's a brass insert that was put into the plastic when it was molded. You can break those, and if you do, it's just gonna suck trying to fix it. I mean, you can ultimately, but I suggest not trying to over tighten things. I'm gonna go ahead and transfer this because I'm not going to be using it anymore. The hard drive upgrade, like I said, was a challenge. There's a reason for that. The laptops of the past, forever, basically PC laptops, have used a BIOS. Nowadays, everything's moving to EFI or UEFI. In the case of the X401A1, which is what this is, it doesn't like to boot off of other drives. So I was able to find out that there's an older version of the BIOS that's a little more friendly to being able to boot off of other devices. It's version 206, I believe. There's actually a copy of the BIOS file on the hard drive that this shipped with. It basically is the model number .bin. The BIOS it shipped with was newer. It was version 210, I believe, 210 or 211. It has an option which is enable CSM. When you enable it, it allows other boot options, and with that enabled, you can boot a Windows 8 CD, install Windows 8 onto your new flash hard drive, and you'll be able to use it just fine. The problem is it doesn't actually ship with a Windows 8 CD, so you have to go out and Google yourself a way to download a Windows 8 ISO. So you can use the Microsoft Windows 7 ISO to USB tool, or you can use an external USB CD-ROM drive, which is what I did to install this. And then you go to support.asus.com, put in your model number. In this case, if it was one of the Doorbuster specials, it's a X401A1. Even though the model number is an X401B-PH something or other, I can't remember the exact number, it's actually an A1 on their website. Okay, when you go to put the top back on, it's pretty easy. Just make sure you slide in the ZIF connector all the way until the white line basically is flush with the white line on the PCB at the motherboard. Or blue line in the case of the mouse part. And then you snap back all the little plastic snaps, kind of in the reverse order from when you take it off. And again, these two holes are the ones that get the longest screws. There's only two that are a different size than all the rest. So I'll go ahead and put those in first. These are one of those places where you could break those little plastic inserts loose, or brass inserts from the plastic. So be careful when you're tightening. You don't want to over tighten. You'll get a feel for about how tight everything is when you remove it. Double check all the little snaps. Like I said, I've already installed Windows 8. There's no need for a license key, which is nice. It's stored in the UEFI or BIOS. So, run a little Windows assessment test. So you can see it in action. That's the score it's going to get, but just in case you're questioning whether or not it works okay with 8 gigs of RAM or the solid state drive, I'll run it through a little test. After this, I'm going to do a quick gaming review test, and if you have any questions or comments, leave them below. I'd be glad to help. The downside to the upgrade on the solid state is you can't clone it. I was unable to use any of the ones that claim to be okay with UEFI computers. I tried, I think, 7 different cloning software, and none of them were able to clone to the solid state drive. So that leaves you with doing a fresh install. There is technically a WIM file in the restore partition that you can get off, and then use ImageX to apply it to the solid state drive and avoid having to find yourself an ISO, but that's a little more complicated and more for the tech savvy people. You can do it if you want. If you have questions, I'd be happy to help you with that. So yeah. As far as performance goes with the upgrades, I was already impressed by this little guy. CPU and memory and stuff out of the box was better than I expected. I haven't done a lot of gaming with it. Mostly spent most of my time trying to get the clone to work. But, you know, since getting the solid state drive in there and getting it upgraded with 8 gigs of RAM and doing a little bit of playing around, it is a very solid performer. I think I've spent, you know, well under $400 on this, and I don't think you could come close with a laptop anywhere near that price range. I don't know if the camera's picking it up, but the CPU fan is actually spinning up a little higher than it normally does. It doesn't get loud. A lot of cheap laptops do, so that's one of the other things I've been pretty impressed with. Oh, I lost 0.1 on the disk transfer rate from when I first installed it. Probably because it has less free space on it now. Anyway, that's a quick little upgrade of this X401A one. If you have any questions, like I said, feel free to post. Thanks.